Alright, so today I want to show you how to make a metallic looking ball python. A ball python that looks like it's made of metal. As a matter of fact, someone actually left a question under one of my videos and they were like, hey, what genes do I mix together to make a ball python that has a metallic appearance to the snake? And there's really no, it's like there's no metallic gene that you can actually work together. Essentially what you have to do is you have to know which genes work together to give you the visual appearance of the metallic snake. And I know probably about a dozen different ways to make a metallic looking ball python, but I'm sure there's a lot of other different ways. As a matter of fact, if I actually missed some in this video, you might want to put a comment in the comment section below this video, and maybe we'll just start a running list of all the different ways that you can make a metallic looking ball python. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over the internet and I want to show you the few ways that I know of to make a metallic looking ball python. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on Morphmarket.com and I want to start with the snake that you probably are not familiar with, and this is, take a look at this one. This looks really kind of a metallic looking snake. As a matter of fact, this is, you can actually make a brass ball, which is the vanilla black pastel, and this actually is, I guess you would call it a super brass ball. It actually has the super vanilla and the super black pastel, and when it comes to genes, I'd say the super black pastel works pretty good. You know, the super cinnamon and the super black pastel making a lot of these genes look like a metallic color. The black pastel and the cinnamon and the pastel are probably some of the most common genes you can actually mix with a lot of combos to make some metallic looking snakes. And this one's kind of interesting. If you actually bred this to something else, all the offspring would come out as brass balls, which would be the black pastel vanilla. And the brass ball doesn't really look that metallic just by itself, but if you actually make the super, it makes for a really amazing snake. If you actually look at the price on this, I actually like to show some of these prices because a lot of people are asking, hey, what is it going to cost me to get a metallic snake? And this one actually sold for $800. It was actually born this year, January 9th, 2020. So that's a pretty awesome looking metallic snake. So here's another one I wanted to show you. This is kind of the same thing. It's almost sort of metallic, not quite as bright, but it has the same genes. So this one actually has the black pastel and the super vanilla. So it has one less black pastel in the mix. You can see it's a little bit metallic, not quite as bright as the last one. And you actually have pastel in the mix too. So that brings out a little bit more of the yellow, pretty close to a metallic looking snake. And here's another one I want to show you. This one I actually kind of ran into the other day. This one looks pretty metallic too. Take a look at this one. It's actually a gargoyle. It's a pastel gargoyle. And the gargoyle is actually the het red axanthic and the cinnamon. And this also has pastel in the mix. Makes for a really impressive snake. As a matter of fact, this one is pretty expensive. This kind of surprised me. $1,000 for this one. Born in 2019. Some of these metallic looking snakes are pretty incredible. So here's another one. This is actually it's actually a red axanthic, which is the super het red axanthic. And the red axanthics, I'd say with 2 copies of the het red, most of them are always kind of a metallic looking snake. And this one actually has the pastel and the chocolate in the mix. I thought this made for probably one of the best metallic looking snakes of all the red axanthics. Sometimes you can mix in like ghost and other genes into the mix and you get kind of a lighter looking metallic looking snake. But you know, the red axanthic it's not as common as a lot of the other genes, and this one actually sold for $350. Of course, this was back in 2016. Sometimes the prices can drastically change, you know, over just a few years. It's pretty incredible. This is it's pretty close to being one of the best all metallic snakes out there. So here's another one. This has to be hands down one of my favorite looking metallic snakes. And when you actually first look at it, you think, you know, this looks like a pied because it has these big patches of white. And believe it or not, this is not even het pied, which is pretty surprising. This is actually the gray matter. And the gray matter actually consists of the champagne and the super cinnamon. And I'd say it's a little bit problematic to actually get into the gray matters because if you're actually working with champagne, you breed champagne to almost anything else. A lot of times you'll get like almost a patternless snake that's a slightly different color than your champagne. Champagne is really visually down. I'd say champagne's probably up there with the albinos. The albinos and the champagne, you mix it with almost anything else and you really have a really strong influence as far as the visual appearance from the champagne or the albino. And the super cinnamon's a little bit tricky too, because the super cinnamon tends to have some genetic anomalies with kinking of the spine. Sometimes you have some duck billing a little bit, so you're actually working with a combination that is kind of problematic, and that's kind of what steers people away from the gray matter, which really drives the demand down. So it's kind of interesting between the supply and the demand on ball pythons. Since the demand is really low, the prices are usually really high because there's a limited number of them, and I'd say the demand is higher than the supply because there's not a lot of people producing them. And these actually, take a look at the price on this one, $1,500, even with a problematic combination. And it's kind of interesting, you know, if there was no problems at all, people would mass produce them and there'd be abundance of gray matters, which would really drive the price down. And it's just kind of the opposite, where it's a really impressive combination, but there's not a lot of people actually producing them a lot of times, you know, because of some of the problems with the super cinnamon and kind of the challenges with the champagne. But let me tell you, when it comes to champagne, I would say this is probably the #1 best champagne combo that you can actually make. As a matter of fact, if I was into this project and I was working with champagne, I would probably only breed gray matters. As a matter of fact, you could probably substitute, I was thinking you could actually do like a cinnamon black pastel, which would really be like a gray matter 8-ball. I don't know if it would look the same. I actually haven't looked that up. The cinnamon's actually allelic with the black pastel. You could probably do the same thing with the champagne black pastel, which would be kind of interesting to look into. And a lot of people say if you actually have this one copy of the cinnamon, one copy of the black pastel, it works almost the same as the super cinnamon, and you tend to have fewer genetic problems than either the super cinnamon or the super black pastel. It's a really awesome project. So here's another really silver snake. As a matter of fact, silver is in the name. Take a look at this. This is actually the silver bullet, about as silver as you can get. And it really depends. I've seen a lot of versions of a lot of these snakes, and some of them are more silver than the other. As a matter of fact, if you look at the genes on this one, this is actually the super cinnamon and the pastel. So it's you still have the super cinnamon in there instead of the champagne with the gray matter. You're replacing that with the pastel, giving you the silver bullet. Pretty awesome. And if you're actually getting into this project, this one is $800. So some of these are pretty expensive. As a matter of fact, I was trying to look at the year on this. This is actually back in 2016, 2017. So some of these prices are not really that accurate. Looking at, you know, multi-year prices on some of these ball pythons can be really challenging. Sometimes they can increase and sometimes they can decrease significantly. So here is a combination that I've actually produced in my collection, and that is a bamboo with the pinstripe. You can actually mix the bamboo with the pinstripe or the bamboo with the lemon blast, which is the pastel pinstripe. Probably one of the most brightest metallic snakes that I've ever produced in my collection. And I'd say as a hatchling, they are super bright. Some of them are like bright gold, almost like metallic, and then some of them are like, kind of like a silver color. Really depends on the line of, you know, the bamboo and the pinstripe mixed together and what other genes are in the mix. And if you're actually looking at prices on this one, this is actually $900. It's kind of interesting. Some of these metallic looking snakes seem to have a higher price than a lot of your other combinations. So here's another one. This is actually the silver streak. Really impressive snake. And it's kind of interesting. And this one looks silver, but it's a little bit washed out in places across the snake. Really silvery snake. This is actually the super pastel and the black pastel. So you can kind of see a pattern between the cinnamon, the super cinnamon, the pastel, and the black pastel. You know, the black pastel and the super black pastel. So between the black pastel and the cinnamon, I'd say those are kind of the ingredients of making really silver snakes, whether you have one copy of the gene or 2 copies of the gene, although the supers tend to have some of the genetic anomalies. And this one, if you're actually looking at prices, $400, probably one of the least expensive silver snakes that you can actually get. This is the Silver Streak. So here is a really super awesome snake. As a matter of fact, if you actually get into the axanthics and the axanthic combos, a lot of times you can produce really amazing, super bright silver looking snakes. And it really depends on the line of the axanthic. Sometimes you can actually see, this is actually the VPI axanthic, and some VPI axanthics aren't really as bright silver as this one. So there can be really huge variabilities depending on kind of the version of the line of the VPI axanthic that you actually get into. You can also do kind of the similar thing with the TSK axanthic or some of the other recessive axanthics. And this one actually has spider and pinstripe. And it seems like when you add the two, the spinner, which is the spider and the pinstripe, you actually increase kind of the silvery color of the snake. Makes for a really amazing combination. And if you actually look at the price on this, I usually don't look at all the prices, but this one is $350, which is pretty amazing, you know, considering it's actually like a 4-gene combo. You have 2 copies of the axanthic, which is recessive. You need 2 copies of the gene for a visual, and then you have the spider and the pinstripe on top of that. So take a look at this one. This one's almost a silver snake. This is actually a banana sterling. And if we actually look at the genes in this one, the sterling is actually the cinnamon and the super pastel. Makes for some almost kind of silver looking snakes. And I'd say when you add banana to this, it makes a little bit more silver. Maybe not as bright silver metallic as some of the other combinations. This one's actually $350, which is not bad for, you know, a 4-gene combo, 3 different morphs in this one. So I kind of wanted to move into some of the blue-eyed leucistic complexes. You can actually make some pretty silvery looking snakes when you're actually working in some of these the blue-eyed leucistics that don't make a white snake in all cases. So for example, this is actually a purple passion, which is the Mojave and the Phantom. And I'd say a lot of times the Mojave and the Phantom, you mix them together, sometimes you get like a bright purple snake, and sometimes you get an almost silvery looking snake. It really depends on the different combination. I've seen a lot of variation in purple passions, but when it comes to silvery snakes, the first thing I was thinking of is some of the purple passions that I've seen are really impressive, almost really super metallic looking, pretty amazing. This one is $300, so not too bad on the price on that one. So here's another blue-eyed leucistic. This is actually the Mystic Potion, which is similar to the Purple Passion. This is actually the Mojave and the Mystic instead of the Mojave and the Phantom. So the Phantoms and the Mystics, a lot of times when you mix them with certain genes in the blue-eyed leucistic, you don't always get the all-white snake with the blue eyes. Sometimes you get kind of these purplish snakes, and sometimes they can be pretty metallic looking. It's pretty amazing how it kind of like a silvery color a lot of these combinations can be. So here's the last one I wanted to show you. This is actually another gene in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. This is a super phantom, and a lot of the phantoms, the mystics, and the specials and stuff like that, you know, if you actually breed them together and make the supers, you don't get an all-white snake, even though they're in the blue-eyed leucistic. And sometimes you actually get these metallic-looking snakes. The super phantom is probably one of the brightest metallic-looking supers in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Frederico Cifuentes asks, what day do you cut your ball python eggs on? And that is a very good question. For ball python eggs, we actually incubate them for 60 days. And some people cut them a little bit early just to kind of peek in to see what they have before they actually hatch. And it can be kind of risky. As a matter of fact, one year when I first started in ball pythons, I bought a scaleless head and I bred it to a lemon blast, a pastel pinstripe. And I actually had a clutch of eggs. I cut one egg a little bit too early, and that immature snake actually flew out of the egg and it died, unfortunately. And at the time, the scaleless head lemon blasts were selling for $6,000 a piece, which was really devastating. I couldn't believe I just lost a $6,000 snake, potentially from cutting a little bit too early. So I pretty much switched to, I only cut eggs now if the egg tooth of the snake actually starts cutting first before I actually, you know, go in there and cut. Usually if I have like a clutch of 10 eggs, I'll wait until at least 5 of them have the egg tooth cuts on the egg before I actually go in and cut them open open a little bit and see what's in there. You definitely don't want to cut too early. And if the temperature is a little bit hotter or colder, you can actually change the length of incubation before those eggs hatch. So if it's a few degrees too cold, as a matter of fact, if you have like 5 or 10 degrees too cold, it'll actually hatch significantly longer, sometimes a week or two longer if you have a really cold incubation temperature. Maybe if your thermometer's not calibrated or something goes wrong with your incubator, it's really dangerous actually cutting early. Some people actually cut on a certain number of days no matter what because they know their incubator has a certain temperature that is really maintained really solid. And I kind of have to, I actually lost that first snake. I don't really cut unless I actually see the hatchlings coming out first. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.